The Human Body, Chapter 11. Take the human body alone. The chances that all the functions of an individual would just happen is a statistical monstrosity. George H. Gallup. 1. Perfect bodies exist for the purpose of providing us with joy. To better understand the type of imperfect body we currently have on this earth, we need to consider the type of body that all advanced humans have throughout the universe. They have a perfect body, the type of body that any of us would desire. If we considered which parts and functions of our body make us happy and which ones do not, we could imagine what a perfect body might be like. The perfect physical body exists to ensure that its functions and attributes aid in the ultimate experience for the being that is utilizing it. More simply, a perfected human body exists to bring the most quintessential, ultimate sense of joy possible to a human being. There is no other purpose. Because there is no other reason for human existence except to experience joy, it would make sense to only have body functions that serve the purpose for which the body exists in the first place. Even with the primitive, limited technology available to us currently, an individual can make the choice to change the physical body in a way that provides a more fulfilling sense of personal contentment. So, one can imagine what can be done by advanced human beings to the bodies they possess. Every human being in the universe will end up with the type of body that provides the individual with the ultimate experience of human existence. The purpose for our imperfect bodies, on the other hand, is to provide us with the opposite experience from that which we would receive from a perfect body. Experiencing an imperfect body helps us appreciate the perfect human body that each of us will possess forever. 2. Our essence creates the energy needed for the perfect body. We have discussed how the human essence provides perpetual and everlasting energy to the perfect body, but it has not been explained how this essence creates the energy needed to support all of the body's functions. Does the essence burn out over time? Based on the second law of thermodynamics, upon which current science establishes many of its theories and conclusions concerning the entropy of all matter, it must. Regardless of what science proposes, however, our essence will never lose its ability to create and provide energy for the perfected body. To understand this concept, which upon first consideration appears to oppose the accepted laws of thermodynamics, let's take a look at other laws proposed by scientific, quote-unquote, systematic observation that true reality seems to contradict. 3. Science opposes the function of an essence. The first law of thermodynamics basically proposes that any matter that produces energy can store or hold its own energy, and that this internal energy is conserved. The concept of quote-unquote heat relating to the term quote-unquote thermo is a process by which energy is added to a system of composed matter from an outside source, or energy is lost to its surrounding environment. The law also stipulates that energy can be lost by the system, our body in this case, when it acts upon its surroundings, or conversely, it gains energy as a result of its surroundings acting upon it. For example, when it is cold outside, our bodies react to the cold environment by expending energy to keep us warm. This is how a quote-unquote system loses energy. When we eat something from our environment, we are providing our quote-unquote system with energy. This is how a quote-unquote system gains energy. This first law leads to the law of conservation. This law states that energy cannot be destroyed, but is consistently conserved throughout the universe in the exchanges from one source of energy to another. Thus, the total amount of energy in an isolated system, i.e., the body or the essence, remains constant. The law of conservation states, therefore, that the only thing that can happen with energy in an isolated system is that it can change form. All of these so-called quote-unquote laws mandate that perpetual energy produced by any system of matter can only work if it delivers no energy to its surroundings, or if it does not expend more energy than is put into it. Because our essence does indeed expend energy to our body and then replaces the spent energy by creating the energy it needs for itself, its function seems to oppose all the known laws of science. 4. Understanding dark matter dispels science-based quote-unquote truths. Based on these current scientific quote-unquote laws, the reality presented for the first time in this book could not be true. Current scientific laws demand that, in time, the universe will end just as it began. Therefore, science stipulates, or at least implies, that human beings are not entities of an eternal nature, but are just a small part of a universe that is dying. Scientists come to this conclusion by observing the imperfect nature of not only our human body, but also our environment. From everything we know about our experience on this earth, it seems that everything around us is slowly dying, including ourselves. These scientific conclusions are made because of science's inability to observe and accept the existence of an essence. However, even as we are forced to accept the reality of death, the end of our existence, the very brain that postulates our eventual ending fights the inevitable and creates a hope that it might not be true reality. Fortunately, the real truth verifies and proves that the eternal nature of humanity is indeed true. The piece of the puzzle that keeps the conclusions made by scientific theories just quote-unquote theories instead of true reality is science's inability to completely understand dark matter, the space that makes up the universe where there appears to be no matter, as explained previously. If science wants to speculate that a quote-unquote Big Bang formed our universe, then it must reconcile itself according to the laws that it has established, to conclude that one day there will be nothing in the universe except for quote-unquote space. What science cannot explain is exactly what acted upon the environment of the universe to expend its energy to create the Big Bang. Accepting the Big Bang theory, that enormous amounts of energy were responsible for the formation of the universe, then it follows that this energy must be in a state of entropy continually, meaning that the universe itself is dying. Was the quote-unquote Big Bang, therefore, the last breath of a dying universe that somehow created itself again? Again, scientific conclusions lead to irresponsible speculations, guesses, that only fit into the parameters of their own accepted conclusions, the laws of science. In almost every case throughout history, as the human race has advanced into the future, scientific conclusions have been changed, rejected, or proven to be inaccurate. Consider again that science once accepted as fact that the Earth was flat and that the Earth was the center of the solar system. Building upon scientific reasoning and conclusions, real truth will show how quote-unquote space actually supports and allows our universe to function as it does, and allows it and the human beings who control it to exist forever. 5. Dark matter provides everything needed to produce energy. As explained previously, the sun is the factory that takes the substance of dark matter, space, and transforms it into energy. To accommodate scientific terms, it can be said, in the case of the sun, that the infinite dark matter of our universe is potential energy that is turned into kinetic energy. But again, dark matter does not contain any actual energy. It contains everything needed to produce energy, as has been stated, i.e., the protons, neutrons, and electrons that make up all things. Acting alone, a proton, neutron, or electron can do nothing. Yet acting together, they produce the necessary energy levels that make up all matter. When the sun draws on the infinite environment of space to create its perpetual energy, it is acting in accordance with some of the accepted aspects of the laws of thermodynamics. Quote-unquote dark matter is brought into the sun in order to balance the energy that goes out. 6. Our essence creates perpetual energy. The conclusions made thus far should help the reader understand the exact way that an essence is able to provide a perfected body with all the energy that it will ever need to function properly. An essence uses the same perpetual mechanics as the sun. It is a perpetual factory that takes potential energy from its surrounding environment and turns it into kinetic energy that our sensory systems require to provide us with joy. Currently, our imperfect brain creates energy as electromagnetic impulses whenever we think or act. It emits these pulses through our skull and scalp, which then take off into quote-unquote space. The perfect body, on the other hand, allows the essence to draw in the components of the potential energy found in any surrounding environment and then transform them into kinetic, usable energy. If we are underwater, for example, the perfect body allows the two hydrogen atoms bonded to the one oxygen atom in the water molecule to permeate our skull and be transformed by our essence into the energy that our muscles need in order to swim at leisure on top of or underwater as long as we so desire. If we find ourselves with a perfect body anywhere in the universe, our perfect human essence has the ability to utilize any form of energy from any source of matter found in any environment. It can utilize the subatomic particles of space and transform them into the energy that ensures our body can fulfill the purpose of its creation and bring us joy. Although an imperfect body would not survive the most hostile environs of space, a perfect body survives just fine. Again, it can survive because the essence can utilize any form of matter from its surroundings in any environment and create the energy the body needs in order to function perfectly. As explained previously, there are some differences between advanced perfected bodies depending on the humanity type chosen by the individual. Lunarian and Stellarian minds cannot manipulate matter at will. Their essence, however, is made of the same matter as the essences of all human beings, even Solarians. However, Solarians have a type of body that can use the full power of the essence at will. Lunarian and Stellarian bodies cannot utilize the full power of the essence. They cannot control the power of the essence. Their essence works with their body similarly to how the heart muscle works with the imperfect body. Without any thought or will of our own, our hearts keep our imperfect bodies supplied with energy. No human essence in an imperfect body can, by using free will or the energy of thought, control the functions of the heart. The heart beats to keep the body alive whether its owner likes it or not. Similarly, the Lunarian and Stellarian body is kept alive and functioning by the power of the essence. Solarians, on the other hand, though their body is also kept alive by the essence, have the ability to utilize its power to manipulate the subatomic makeup of all matter. The primary differences between advanced human body types have only to do with the body itself, not the essence. All human essences are of the same composition of element. What makes each essence different is not its makeup, but what is recorded in it. The experiences differ in each essence according to the free will of the individual whose physical body's sensory receptors created each experience. Although the experiences in each essence vary, each essence has the exact same potential of power. However, the potential of each experience is restricted or limited by the physical body in which the individual's essence is placed. 7. The perfect body recycles the subatomic particles of matter. When an imperfect body takes in energy from its environment, in the form of food, for example, it uses what it needs and then expels the rest through excrement. To use what it needs, the imperfect body takes the matter and breaks it down into other forms of matter, which byproducts are sent back into the environment, such as in the form of perspiration and exhaled breath. So what is the byproduct of the essence, if any? If one takes in the subatomic particles from the environment, forms them into matter that produces energy, and then uses that energy, what is left over? If the subatomic particles of matter cannot be destroyed, then what happens to them after the essence gets done with them? As mentioned earlier, our essence creates and gives off the energy that is needed by a perfect human body in order to function. Energy is always some kind of matter acting upon other matter, or being acted upon by other matter. When matter interacts, it creates a reaction of some kind. In our nose, we call the reaction a quote-unquote smell. In our eyes, quote-unquote sight. On our skin, quote-unquote touch. In our mouth, quote-unquote taste. In our ears, quote-unquote sound. And in our brains, quote-unquote thought. The quote-unquote reactions themselves do not destroy or break down element. If an entity of matter, us, took in elements and didn't use them up, then the elements would remain in the isolated environment of our body and make us bigger and bigger and bigger. That is not the case in true reality. Instead, this is what happens. In a perfect body, our essence has the power to take apart the elements of our environment and change the protons, neutrons, and electrons into the elements that can create a reaction with our body's sensory systems. Once the action is complete, our essence then breaks down the element it created back into subatomic particles, which are recycled by our essence and used again. Therefore, as long as no energy escapes the body, the essence would never need anything from its environment to provide the body with the energy it requires to function. As mentioned, the difference between advanced humans and their individual abilities is their body type, based on what humanity type they have chosen for themselves. Lunarians and Stellarians do not need bodies that would require their essence to do much more than take care of the needs of the Lunarian and Stellarian body. Therefore, these body types do not import a great amount of subatomic particles from their environment. All the energy they need is provided for their body by the power of the essence, which can recycle its own energy to maintain itself. Solarians, on the other hand, emit great amounts of energy from their essence as they give commands to other matter. This, in return, requires a great amount from their environment. 8. The energy from new experiences are stored in the essence forever. In the perfect body, the production and use of energy by the essence, especially in the Lunarian and Stellarian type bodies, is contained and recycled in the performance of the sensory systems of the body, but not in the formation of a new experience. In other words, when an advanced human is hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, or touching something, the essence provides all the necessary energy to perform these functions. However, there is an expenditure of energy that cannot be recycled. This is the energy produced by a quote-unquote thought. Quote-unquote thinking is generally not accepted as part of our senses in either type of body, perfect or imperfect, although real truth categorizes it as such. It is the function that analyzes the energies that our senses produce and organizes them into experiences, which are then stored in the essence as memories. In a perfect body, for example, if we see and smell a flower, our essence provides the energy needed for the eyes to see and the nose to smell it. Once these two sensory receptor systems have taken energy from the essence to perform the action of seeing and smelling, the energy produced from these actions is given back to the essence in the form of a new experience. The new experience, however, will stay in the essence forever and will not be recycled by the essence for other experiences. This is when the essence needs to draw in more energy from outside of the body. This process agrees with the scientific law that matter cannot be created or destroyed. Neither our imperfect nor our perfect body destroys matter. 9. The essence creates only one type of energy for the needs of the perfect body. Our imperfect body changes matter from food into basic sugars, for example, which the body can then utilize to create energy. This process needs energy to perform the functions of the imperfect body of biting, chewing, swallowing, digestion, and etc. In a perfect body, the essence eliminates secondary processes that require energy and instead creates the matter that the perfect body's sensory organs can directly utilize. Perfect sensory organs do not quote-unquote use up any matter, but are acted upon by the matter. For example, When a person with a perfect body feels wind on their face, the matter that makes up the wind is not destroyed or changed in any way, but it does react with the sensory receptors of touch to give the person a sensation of feeling wind. Again, the only energy that is spent is when the experience of feeling the wind, if it is a new experience, is recorded in the essence. This energy alone then needs to be replenished. Because the perfect body has only the nervous system as a delivery process connected to the sensory receptors, only one type of matter needs to be produced for the perfected senses to create sensation. The same matter that interacts with the perfected body's sensory organs also gives the cells of its muscles, tissues, and bones the stimulation they need to continue to do what they were created to do. This is why a perfect body does not get tired or need sleep. Again, once the essence takes the basic components of matter from the surrounding environment and creates the energy that the body needs, it is passed through the nervous system to the cells of the perfect body. Once it interacts with the cells, the matter is again passed back to the essence to be broken back down into the basic components, which are then recycled or added to the essence as a new experience. Except in a Solarian body, which uses great amounts of energy in creation and in doing what Solarians do, energy does not leave the perfect body and its essence. When we use the muscles of a perfect body, for example, energy is not quote-unquote used up. The cells of the muscles are in their perfect state and will remain so forever. However, for a muscle cell to cause the bicep to contract, for example, it needs the stimulation from the energy that the essence creates. 10. The perfect body survives in any environment. Let's assume that lead is an element that cannot be easily penetrated by most other elements. For the sake of this example, let's further assume that no elements can pass through it. If we can make a lead box that no other elements can enter into or escape from, and place a person with an imperfect body in it, that person would eventually die. This would happen because an imperfect body takes in oxygen and expels carbon dioxide. In other words, the element of oxygen enters into the body and creates a reaction which produces a different combination of the elements already present. Carbon dioxide from carbon and oxygen. Keep in mind that a carbon-based body must take in carbon through eating to produce the energy to function. If a carbon-based body did not get rid of some of the carbon it takes in after utilizing it as it needs, that body would grow bigger and bigger. Basically, this is why we exhale carbon dioxide, to keep our carbon-based bodies in equilibrium. In this example, the reaction of oxygen entering the body is that two oxygen atoms grab onto a carbon atom and pull it out of the carbon-based body, creating carbon dioxide, CO2. Sure, the person can breathe in the CO2 and use the two oxygen atoms to bind to another couple of carbon atoms and exhale again, but eventually there will not be enough oxygen atoms to take away the carbon atoms and the person will suffocate and die. This is not so with the perfect body. In an enclosed lead box, continuing this assumption for our example only, the essence will utilize whatever atoms are available, even the lead itself, and break them down into their basic components of protons, neutrons, and electrons. It will then form the appropriate elements that can react with the perfect body. A Lunarian or a Stellarian would have to stay in the box a lot longer than a Solarian, because their bodies would not immediately require a lot from their surrounding environment. Eventually, the lead element would be dissolved by the power of the essence as the Lunarian and Stellarian mind creates the new experience of being enclosed in a lead box. In the case of a Solarian, however, the Solarian mind can immediately change the composition of the lead into its subatomic particles, and the lead box would simply disappear. Without doubt, the perfect human body is the greatest biomachine ever created, or rather, that has ever existed in the universe. 11. Our imperfect body helps us appreciate the potential of a perfect body. To appreciate the extraordinary and seemingly miraculous potential of our incredible essence, we were given an imperfect body that does not allow our essence to draw upon the surrounding environment for potential energy. It's as if a covering or veil is placed over our otherwise powerful essence so that it is restrained from exercising its full potential. Consequently, we are forced to depend upon the imperfect features of our anatomy in order to get the energy we need to function. We would never correctly perceive our essence as quote-unquote extraordinary, quote-unquote seemingly miraculous, or quote-unquote incredible if we only had the one experience of human perfection. It would just seem quote-unquote ordinary. An imperfect body provides the contrast needed to develop the proper perspective of just how extraordinary, miraculous, and incredible the perfect human body is. In an imperfect body, the essence must depend upon the energy provided to it in its enclosed environment, which is greatly limited. Thus, the essence's incredible power is restricted. If it wasn't restricted, it would overwhelm the imperfect brain we currently have. It is also this restriction that keeps us from being able to utilize the essence to its full capacity and call upon its stored memories. If we could, we would remember everything about ourselves and the whole universe and negate the imperfect experience we needed to go through during our second stage of human development. Keep in mind, in an imperfect body, we store memories in both our imperfectly functioning physical brain and in our essence. The imperfect body was designed to keep the essence safe from us accessing its vast power. 12. A perfect body has only a nervous and musculoskeletal system. A perfect body does not have a digestive, respiratory, or circulatory system, which includes all other subsystems such as the lymphatic system. It has only two basic systems, the musculoskeletal system and the nervous system. When we think about it, a human being can only experience joy through the nervous system. None of the other systems of the imperfect body aid the nervous system in delivering what our sensory organs produce, which are the only things that we care to experience anyway. The fragrance of a rose that enters our nose does not, of itself, deliver any reflection of joy. The nerve endings known as quote-unquote sensory receptors in our nose are responsible for the wonderful smell of a beautiful rose. The sensory receptors of our eyes deliver the quote-unquote beauty of the rose. The sensory receptors in our skin allow the velvet texture of its petals to fulfill our desire for touch. And though the rose makes no noise to satisfy our sense of hearing, it can be tasted in conjunction with smelling it, so as to provide a sensory experience through the receptors found on our tongue. The perfect brain does not store memories, but is used solely for the accumulation and processing of the energy received through the sensory organs, much like our imperfect brains currently work. These perfected brains also produce the appropriate energy patterns of each sensory experience so that a memory can be created and stored on the essence. Sensory systems allow us to interact with our environment and enjoy it. They sense the external world and transmit the information to the brain, where it is processed and interpreted. Therefore, we only need these few unique systems to fulfill the purpose of our creation. 13. Imperfect bodies cause us misery. The essence provides the energy needed to support the sensory systems of the perfect body. A complete and perfect nervous system delivers this energy from the essence to the musculoskeletal system and the subsystems of skin, hair, etc., and then delivers the sensations created back to the brain. But because our essence is quote-unquote veiled in our current imperfect bodies and cannot draw upon the surrounding environment as a source of energy, the other systems of our body are vital to our existence. But what kind of existence is it? Our existing imperfect systems deliver misery and eventual death to us, at least until we, science, understand more than we currently do now. All disease is delivered through the circulatory, digestive, or respiratory systems. Bacteria and viruses that cause us so much pain and misery do not gain access to our bodies through the nervous and musculoskeletal systems, although these important systems can be greatly affected by them. However, in a perfect world, there are no viruses or bacteria that affect an advanced human body. These pestering organisms were specifically engineered and designed for an imperfect world. They interact with our imperfect bodies in an environment that ensures us the probative and comparative experience intended for this life. 14. A human consists of a body and an essence. Our brain is something completely separate from the essence which enters our body at birth. The brain is what processes the input from the sensory systems and is what creates the energy patterns that are stored in the essence as memories. In other words, even the perfect body needs a brain. Without it, the human essence would be useless. In addition, without the body, the essence would be like a sun that does not have an earth to give light and warmth to. What purpose would there be for the energy produced by the essence if there was nothing that could use its energy? We do not become a complete human being unless we have both a body and an essence. The absence of either one will never constitute a complete and individual human being. When the essence enters the imperfect body, we become a conscious, living human being. When the essence leaves the body, we no longer exist as the individual person we were when our essence was in our imperfect body. But each life experience, incarnation, becomes an integral part of understanding who we are. Therefore, in essence, each individual is an anthology, a collection, of different imperfect people who have lived upon the earth. But this anthology is not nearly the complete person, because we existed for billions of years before the life-death scenario of our second stage of development, and we will exist forever thereafter, our short time in mortality adds very little to who we really are. Nevertheless, it is the most significant part of our existence that helps us later to fully enjoy who we are. An argument often encountered from people who do not have a proper understanding of reality is that a forming fetus inside of a mother's womb becomes a human being once the cells begin to divide and form the body. This short-sighted and narrow view does not come from reality, but from the inability of the quote-unquote veiled, imperfect brain to recognize and understand the concept and function of the essence. The revealing of reality given in this book should leave no argument. The only time a human being can exist is if there is a body and an essence. The essence enters into the body upon the first breath taken by the newborn and leaves with the last breath when the person dies, as has been explained. There is no other reality. 15. Understanding our essence can solve many of the mysteries of the mind. Our imperfect brain's inability to respond to and communicate with our essence has already been discussed at length. We have explained how we store and work with the memories of the experiences gained from our sensory system's input. We have explained the basic problems that occur when our imperfect brain is juxtaposed with our perfect essence. We have solved many of the mysteries of the mind that have eluded the understanding of science since humans began to, quote-unquote, systematically observe how the mind works. But there are some things that only an imperfect brain does, that a perfect brain would never do, that we have not covered yet. The more we understand about the true nature of our physical body and our indestructible and eternal essence, the more we will understand about the mysteries of the mind that have baffled mortal humans from the foundation of our world. 16. Our imperfect brain creates fantasies. One of the many problems of the imperfect brain is that it creates situations that are not part of our current reality. Our brain has a difficult time maintaining a consistent way of categorizing all of our memories into chronological and situational realities. What happened many years ago could influence our current reality because the imperfect brain might perceive something recorded in the past as something relevant or applicable to what is currently taking place. Our inability to maintain an accurate timeline of events can cause our past to affect our present. Well have current psychologists concluded that some of our present emotional conditions are directly related to our past experiences. If a small child, for example, experiences a traumatic event in childhood, even though as an adult the experience is not consciously remembered, the experience's energy presence in the subconscious can still affect the child's future emotions. This happens because the imperfect brain has a hard time putting events, especially those that are not forefront in the conscious mind, into sequential order. Although the past experience might have no significance or relation to current events, the imperfect mind subconsciously coalesces the two events as one and the same, very much like what happens when we dream in a subconscious state. The essence, in contrast, keeps a consistent and perfect timeline of events that we experience. Each event affects us only at the time it is experienced and does not influence any of our present behaviors, unless we bring the memory into our current reality. However, once we do, we are able to distinguish the events as completely separate from one another, never allowing one to influence the outcome of the other. In this way, a perfect brain organizes all experiences and presents them as the conscious now, or better, presents everything consciously as the present. The ability of the perfect brain to recollect experiences instantaneously contributes to our capability to make an immediate comparison in events, so as to always have an appreciation of the experience. For example, if we have eaten a bad tasting apple, we will remember how it tasted the very moment we are biting into a perfect tasting apple, and we will be forever appreciative of comparative experiences. If we couldn't immediately remember the opposing comparative values, we would not be able to appreciate how good an apple is supposed to taste, even after billions of years of eating perfect apples. 17. An imperfect brain inhibits our ability to reason properly. Our imperfect brain creates arguments and contentions that are not based on reality, but on our inability to understand who we are, why we exist, and how we came to exist. Part of the purpose of our imperfect life is for us not to understand these things, so that we will have the desire to continue on in our imperfect state and gain by the experience. These quote-unquote arguments and contentions cause what we recognize as frustration, anxiety, and depression, which lead to anger, heartache, fear, and worry. When we are confronted with a situation that we cannot control and that instead controls us and takes away our free will, our imperfect brain attempts to form a conscious acceptance and justification for the loss of our free will. This leads to the quote-unquote argument and contention of trying to figure out why things aren't turning out how we expected them to. If we understood and could remember the true reality of our individual existence and power, we would let no one control us, nor would we ever be confronted with a situation that we could not control by ourselves. It is vital to our development and eventual human perfection that our minds are veiled, or in other words, that our imperfect bodies don't allow us to remember anything before our birth, and for most of us, anything before our late childhood. As our imperfect brain continues to deteriorate with age in our imperfect world, many of us can't even remember what we just experienced 10 seconds ago. If we could remember all of our past lives and experiences, we would realize that we really cannot die. Knowing this as real truth, if we are experiencing a lifetime of sorrow, pain, misery, and everything opposite of what we would expect out of life, we would kill our body in the hope that the next time around things would be better for us. None of us would stand for an imperfect world that directly opposes our true reality. Consequently, none of us would spend time going through the important second stage of our human development. In addition to our inability to reason properly. There are many cognitive anomalies, some might call them phenomena, that occur because of our imperfect brain. These mental aberrations affect the way that we think about reality. We turn reality into imagination, or into things we desire to be true, but are not. It will not be necessary to cover all of them, for this would require volumes of useless scientific and philosophical words that would confuse and bore most readers. But it is important that we touch upon a few interesting ones that generally affect most people in the same way. 18. Déjà vu is the misfiring of an imperfect brain. Quote-unquote déjà vu is a phenomena experienced by most of us. The term is associated with the experience of feeling sure that one has witnessed or experienced a new situation previous to the moment of the event. This gives one a sense that an event has already happened or has happened before. The experience of déjà vu is usually accompanied by a compelling sense of familiarity and is often associated with what we feel as a strange or eerie sensation. Here's how it works. The moment a new event takes place, our sensory systems act in unison to send their specific energy patterns to the brain to be compiled into a new experience and recorded as a new memory. In the imperfect body, the process of recording the event as a memory takes place twice, once in the actual physical structure of the brain and once in the essence. Usually this is done simultaneously, and no notice is given of the event being recorded twice. However, because the imperfect brain does not always work perfectly, it can misfire and produce the feelings associated with déjà vu. In this case, the event is first recorded in the brain, and then, as the same event is being recorded on the essence, the brain senses the same energy patterns unique to the event a second time, thus causing the person to relive the event and experience déjà vu. 19. Phantom feelings and hallucinations are the result of an imperfect mind's capabilities. We have already discussed hallucinations and how they are formed in our mind. This is also why some amputees sense the phantom feelings that their limbs still exist. They continue to experience sensations from the exact location where their limb once was. When a man has used his legs all of his life and they are suddenly amputated, the memories, energy patterns of being able to use his legs are still recorded in his imperfect brain. Because the imperfect brain has the ability to store memories outside the perfect nature of our essence, it not only stores the information imperfectly, but also recalls and analyzes it with imperfection. At any time, a random sensation of quote-unquote having legs can be felt by an amputee simply by the experience being remembered. This occurs because our imperfect brain attempts to organize the events and categorize them into a perfect chronological order of past, present, and future. The remembered quote-unquote feeling that is stored in the essence, if felt, becomes the current reality. Above, we touched upon the fact that experiences we had in the past can affect our present state of mind. For the same reason, most amputees experience dreams with their limbs intact. They are simply remembering what is recorded. Just because they might have lost their limbs does not mean that they have lost memories of the sensations they felt when they had them. For this very reason, there is much to be said of not trusting one's imperfect mind for the real truth. However, By eliminating the double storage of memories, the perfect brain can only utilize the perfect memories of the essence from which to form its current sensations of reality. The essence categorizes and stores our experiences with perfection. If it were possible to amputate the legs of a perfect body, the person would not have quote-unquote phantom feelings, because the present reality of quote-unquote not having legs would be the only reality present in the mind. In that case, the only way the perfect brain could cause a remembrance of the sensations of quote-unquote having legs would be if the memory of the event was brought to mind by the concentration and free will of the person. But if the body didn't have legs, there would be no present source of sensory stimulation. Therefore, there would be no phantom feelings. Only with a perfect body is it possible to trust one's cognitive perceptions to be perfect recollections of what happened in the past and what is happening in the present. We cannot trust the imperfect brain that we have here on earth. 20. Mental disorders are caused by an imperfect brain. Our imperfect brain also causes a variety of mental disorders that add to the miserable state we sometimes experience on this earth. There is not much joy taken in by our sensory systems when we are faced with a schizophrenic person whose reality can cause us or themselves harm. Schizophrenia is properly defined as an emotional instability or detachment from reality and withdrawal into the self. In a sense, we are all currently subjected to this same mental disorder. Just as we find ourselves uncomfortable in the presence of a person suffering from schizophrenia, we also sense the same level of discomfort around quote-unquote normal people who have formed a reality that is different from our own. There are some people who make life choices that to others seem unstable and detached from reality. In essence, we are all schizophrenic in that during our lifetime we develop various emotional instabilities, such as depression, jealousy, envy, spite, anger, anxiety, and or zealousness for our own reality, etc., that cause us to detach from true reality and withdraw into ourself. 21. We are all equally mentally challenged. Most humans, if not all, live in their own little box from which they are sheltered from others who live inside their own little boxes. But to us, only our box is the quote-unquote right and quote-unquote true reality, while everyone else is living in a fantasy world. The real truth, however, is that we are all living outside of true reality in our current world because of the imperfect state of our brains. Human existence is a quote-unquote true reality that no one can responsibly and reasonably dispute. Some might lie to themselves and create a personal delusion for the sake of trying to make themselves seem different from the rest of us. The existence of the sun, for example, is a quote-unquote true reality. However, a person's individual perception of the sun and their own existence is not necessarily a quote-unquote true reality, but can very well be an invention created in their own mind based on their own individual experience. Thus, it becomes a true reality to them, but a delusion to the rest of us. In past history, many people believed that the sun was turned off at night because their experience, i.e., what they were taught by their teachers and leaders, convinced them of the quote-unquote fact. They could not conceive that the sun continued to shine brightly on the other side of the earth, because they didn't know that there was another side to the earth. Some even believe today that the sun is a reflection of another quote-unquote greater light, like the moon, which we know reflects the light of the sun. However, if all other quote-unquote normal human beings throughout the universe do not agree with a person's quote-unquote perception of reality, then it cannot be quote-unquote true reality. In our imperfect state upon this earth, there are few things that we will all completely agree upon. Likewise, there are very few quote-unquote true realities known and recognized by imperfect humans. In this world, for a purpose we now understand to be in our best interest as developing human beings, it is impossible for a person to live in true reality, which is what we experienced in the perfect human state in our primordial world, and which we will again experience after this mortal world. In the end, when we receive a perfect body once again, we will recall all things we have recorded upon our essence with perfect recollection, in perfect chronological order, and categorized only as the present, and with a perfect understanding. Only then will all of us be able to completely experience, quote-unquote, true reality. 22. The brain converts energy into experience. The perfect brain does not record memories. All memories are stored in the essence. In a perfect body, the organ we refer to as the quote-unquote brain has the primary purpose of receiving energy patterns and organizing them into the energy that each of our sensory receptors provide to make the experience happen in our mind. In a perfect brain, this process takes place both as we experience a current event and as we remember a past event. In either case, the energy must be sent first to the brain for processing. The energy patterns of each event are unique to the event itself. We distinguish one event from another by the uniqueness of the energy patterns each produces. In our imperfect body, we can only experience the full event of each sensory response while the event is taking place. Although we might be able to remember a certain event, our sensory organs do not respond to the memory as they did when the event first took place. In our perfect body, we not only experience the full effect of sensory stimulation during the original event, but also are able to experience the exact same stimulation when we recall the event from our essence in the future. Advanced humans can hear, see, smell, taste, and touch anything in their past just as they did when they first had the experience. The sensory organs of their bodies react to the memory exactly how they did when the event first happened. In this way, we are able to appreciate all of our experiences, good or bad, without having to actually be present in the environment where the experience took place. In other words, we will forever appreciate the experiences we had in an imperfect world without having to live in one again. All of the sensations of any event, including joy and pain, can only be experienced in the brain organ in both a perfect and imperfect body. In both cases, as an event is happening, all of the energy patterns produced by our sensory receptors are sent first to the brain where we are able to benefit from them. However, in an imperfect body, the brain not only takes the patterns of energy and creates the sensations that we experience, but it also records a memory of the event in what scientists would call a new dendrite. These dendrites are formed by the energy patterns of the sensory stimuli acting upon the cells of the brain. With each new dendrite in place, a person can recall the event by concentrating energy on a particular dendrite, which upon being found will cause the person to remember, but not relive the event. If these dendrites are destroyed and damaged by trauma or disease, the person will not recall the recorded event. This is often referred to as amnesia, although their memory of the event may quote-unquote return, as discussed previously, because of the record of the event in the essence. 23. An imperfect brain adds dendrites for each new experience. In a perfect body, the brain reacts, causing us to experience the event, to the energy sent to it from the appropriate sensory receptors as the energy of the event is being passed to the essence for recording. A perfect human brain, the organ itself, would not be able to store all of the new cells/dendrites it produces for all of the events it will be required to record over trillions of years of existence into infinity. If a new dendrite were formed with each new experience, the human skull would have to expand to accommodate the new experiences, making the human head larger and larger as longer amounts of time went by. Maybe this is what leads some in our current world to erroneously imagine advanced humans with very large heads. Because the essence is designed to store an infinite amount of experience, the perfect brain, the organ, does not need to store the events. Its only purpose is to make sure the event is experienced through the sensory receptors of the perfect body. To understand this concept better, let's look at it this way. Let's suppose that the event of eating an ice cream cone creates an energy pattern we will call IC 58,342. When we eat the ice cream, our taste buds contribute the energy level, quote-unquote 5, to the energy pattern. Holding the cone contributes an energy level of quote-unquote 8. Smelling the ice cream cone contributes the energy level of quote-unquote 3. Seeing it contributes quote-unquote 4, and hearing the way our tongue and mouth react to it adds the energy level of quote-unquote 2 to the overall energy pattern of experience. All of these different energy levels are sent to our brain, where they are organized into IC 58,342, which we will remember as eating an ice cream cone. Once our brain has organized the patterns into a specific event, the imperfect brain creates a new dendrite that is distinct from all others, which is now tagged IC 58,342. The energy pattern is also recorded virtually simultaneously on our essence as IC 58,342. If we were to suffer trauma to our brain that damages or completely destroys the IC 58,342 dendrite, then we will never be able to recall the experience of eating the ice cream cone again in our imperfect body, except as previously stated, that the memory, quote-unquote, comes back because it is stored on the essence. However, nothing can affect the IC 58,342 energy pattern stored in our essence. The memory will last forever. 24. imperfect bodies do not allow us to experience perfection. How can we experience the perfect existence when we do not have the means to do so? The reality is that we cannot create the perfect human experience with an imperfect human body. So our creators have placed us in a conundrum where we find ourselves puzzled and confused in trying to find lasting joy in our current reality. Let's say we are a sheep that is perfectly satisfied chomping on the green grass of a soft meadow. Nearby is a family of wolves that have a need to satisfy their hunger. They don't eat grass, they eat sheep. Therefore, so that one might live, the other must die. This reality might be appeasing to the wolves and those who live with them in their quote-unquote little box. But to the sheep, this is unfair, and it is in complete opposition to the reason why they exist. Quote-unquote, just leave us alone in peace and let us eat our grass. Why were we created? So that we could be violently eaten. Unquote. If the grass had a voice, it too would have something to say about this imperfect reality. Quote, when the sheep are full, they defecate on us and kill us, or eat us down so much that it's hard to grow tall and full of the seeds we need to propagate ourselves. So we vote for the wolves' reality and their quote-unquote little box because it serves our own needs. 25. An imperfect world supports our imperfections. Humans are no different. Some of us are quote-unquote sheep. Some of us are quote-unquote wolves. And some of us are quote-unquote grass. If our surrounding environment supports our reality and the construct of our quote-unquote little box, it doesn't matter to us if another's reality ends to support our own. In addition, if someone else's reality helps our own, then we'll support their reality even if ours is different from theirs, but only if theirs continues to support our own. If the quote-unquote wolves start eating the grass because the sheep are all gone, then the grass is going to start to complain about all the wolves just as it did about the sheep. All in all, energy that is expended by all matter in an imperfect world is about supporting the individual organism without affording other organisms the same opportunities of survival. The quote-unquote sheep have no hope in an imperfect world. In contrast, in a perfect world, wolves do not eat sheep, nor do sheep defecate. Furthermore, the grass doesn't care because it was created to be eaten by the sheep and will continue to grow forever without the need to propagate itself, thus all things fulfilling the reason for which they were created. This perfect world allows to be done to all organisms what the individual organism would want done to itself. 26. Few experiences can be labeled as mistakes. Our current world and the bodies in which we exercise our free will and gather experience were set up so that we would fail to find a lasting happiness, except through our willingness to reject our current reality and come to a knowledge of true reality. We were set up to fail, and therefore, paradoxically, as described below, we cannot fail. The enticement of a mortal experience is like the symbolism of our Creator setting a cookie jar within our reach after we had been taught that cookies taste really good, without being able to eat one and see for ourselves. They told us that in order to grow and become like them, we had to eat the cookies, but they forbid us to do so, explaining that if we decided to eat the cookies, we would have to go through all types of misery. Nevertheless, they gave us our free agency to decide for ourselves whether to eat the cookies or not. In fact, they expected us to eat the cookies because they, themselves, previously ate the cookies too. If they had chosen not to, they would not have advanced. So, if by design it is our current reality to fail, can we make a mistake in our current body? If we are failing to find and sustain a complete sense of happiness, are we failing? Or rather, are we fulfilling the purpose for which we exist in an imperfect world? Does a wolf make an error in judgment or a mistake by killing a sheep to survive? The sheep never had a chance from the start. Likewise, do we make mistakes by the way we treat other people in an effort to support our own self-serving individuality? When this selfishness, everything exists for each one of us, was foundationalized into us on a perfect world, how can we make a mistake or be held accountable to anyone but ourselves for what we do during our time in mortality? It is impossible to make an incorrect, unwise, or unfortunate act or decision caused by bad judgment or a lack of information. We shouldn't worry or stress about our quote-unquote mistakes when the bodies that have been provided for us upon this earth don't allow us to access the information to make any better judgment than what we do. No one makes a mistake. It is impossible in this world. The quote-unquote mistake, as seen by one, might very well be the quote-unquote right thing to do for another in order to protect individuality and support life. One of the greatest contributors to the misery we cause each other in our world are the judgments we make about how others exercise their own free will. We create judgment by defining human actions as mistakes or as right and wrong. 27. Serious, quote-unquote, crimes are not even mistakes. Some might propose that humans are more intelligent and much different from, quote-unquote, sheep and wolves. Therefore, they would say that murder and rape, for example, cannot be excused. Advanced human beings who understand the problems associated with imperfect bodies in an imperfect world see things quite differently than we currently do. There is no such thing as quote-unquote death. So how can murder be wrong? Are not the expected civilian casualties during war really just murder? Yet those who are responsible for civilian deaths during the exercises of war justify their actions and do not consider them a mistake. Most people will not be allowed to have sexual abilities forever, so the creators very well knew that most people will misuse that ability in an imperfect situation. So how could they hold rape against a person? Our imperfect perception of how things are will change once we understand how things really are. As mentioned previously, a perfect government ensures that our actions do not impede on the free will of another. Thus, we might assume that anything we do in our mortal life that takes away the free will of another, such as murder and rape, should be expressly condemned no matter what the situation. They must be quote-unquote mistakes. Again, it depends on the perspective of the individual. Millions of people are quote-unquote murdered by a very few when proper nutrition and health care are withheld from them because of unequal economic policies. Tens of thousands of young girls are forced, raped, into sexual experiences, prostitution, that they would never choose except to provide themselves and their families with the basic necessities of life. Yet, many people turn away from this abuse and make no effort to solve the problem, considering it a vicissitude of a third world country. Although there are millions of imperfect humans who are wont to judge murderers and rapists as those who should be punished for their deeds, they do not see that their own apathy and perpetuation of poverty through their own lifestyles are indirect causes of the same so-called quote-unquote mistakes. 28. There are no mistakes in a perfect society. The advanced human beings who oversee our mortal stage of human development in our current world understand the inconsistencies of our true humanity that are the result of living in an imperfect world with an imperfect body. There are none of us who do not affect the free agency of others and justify it in some way or another at one time or another in our current world. We go about our lives unaware of the harm that our actions indirectly do to another person. If we were all held to the same standard of human behavior, that is a condition of an advanced, perfect human society, we would all be criminals in some way or another. There is no mistake in anything that imperfect humans do. It is when we are perfect and have all the resources and abilities associated with our humanity type that we then become accountable to our creators for how we treat each other. This is the reason why there are different humanity types and the specific powers and abilities associated with each. Our overseer is not going to allow any of us to make a quote-unquote mistake in a perfect world. That is why he exists with the power that he has. However, what we do while in an imperfect state is broadly overlooked because of the understanding of our creators who are governed by their own overseer. Again, there are no mistakes made in an imperfect or a perfect world. The universe is, has been, and will always be an environment of order without mistakes. 29. Our instinct to survive comes from the cravings of our imperfect body. The imperfect human body allows for imperfection because of how it reacts to an imperfect environment. The strongest instinct of all organisms in our world is the fight for survival. In humans, who are the only organisms that recognize their own individuality, this survival includes maintaining this individuality at all costs. Only humans fight emotional as well as physical battles in order to survive. This battle is caused by a human being's ability to recognize and pursue perfection. This concept of quote-unquote perfection is instilled in each of us. How this was accomplished was through our foundationalization process, as explained previously. When we experience an environment that is less than perfect, we are unable to sense the feelings of joy to the full extent of our perception of perfection, which is stored in our essence. We are continually motivated, called the battle, toward our individual state of perceived perfection. A big part of this drive for perfection in an imperfect world is in how we view each other and ourselves. Except for little children, there exists no human being in our world who does not see some personal flaw in their own physical appearance or character. 30. Sex provides both pleasure and misery. Our basic sense of physical beauty is greatly affected by the second most powerful instinct that motivates human responsiveness to any particular environment: sexual desire. As mentioned previously, this intense physical desire only occurs in the bodies of advanced human creators, Solarians, who live on the Mercury and Venus-like planets, and in the imperfect makeup of all the bodies we currently possess during our second stage of development. Once we have completed this stage of our development, or better, once we again live in a perfect world with perfected bodies, very few of us will have the desire for sex. Only those who become creators of other human beings. Why this is, how it is, and why it will always be this way will be explained in detail in the next chapter. 31. Lust is caused by the imperfect body. The desire for sex causes extreme emotional variances in our mental state of balance, swinging our emotions from the feeling of ecstasy to that of frustration and sadness. To understand why this happens, we need to examine how sex affects the way we perceive beauty. The most sensual or attractive body is one that appears to comply with all the requirements of a good sexual experience that would lead to the production of human life. We can properly call these bodies quote-unquote sensual because upon seeing them, our sensory systems are affected. When a man sees a woman with full lips, large breasts, or a perfectly shaped torso and buttocks, which encompass the body parts that are responsible for the creation and nurturing of life, his senses begin to respond without any conscious thought or will on his part. His breathing gets deeper in an effort to smell her better. His eyes adjust in an effort to see her better. His mouth produces more saliva to effectuate his sense of taste, and his sense of touch increases. These sensory changes within his body cause the longing he feels to have sex with her. For a woman, a man who exudes physical strength, which would naturally protect her and her offspring, causes the same sensory reactions in her body. His sex organs, his torso, his arms, his chest, affect her, as well as the overall appearance of strength reflected in his body. She too encounters an involuntary sensory stimulation to a man's outward appearance, just as the man does to a female's body. 32. Many actions are motivated by our sex drive. The animalistic propensity to mate is the same for all animals, including the Homo sapiens. The male and female seek out the most compatible partner with whom they can have sex. However, only humans desire the experience for something other than the propagation of their species. In fact, other animals do not even know why they want to mate. An animal's existence only satisfies the longing that its sensory systems produce. Because humans are aware of themselves and can develop a reason why they want to have sex, they can control the quote-unquote longing and can choose to have or not to have sex. Stated another way, animals do not reason out the process of sex in their minds. When the longing comes, they act on it. Humans, however, still have the quote-unquote longing, and some never find a way to subdue and control it. Left unsatisfied, the longing causes the human being to become frustrated and unhappy with their surrounding environment. Being thus frustrated, we attempt to create the environment that will be more conducive to making sex happen. Or else we encounter other emotional and psychological problems directly associated with our inability to satisfy our sexual needs. 33. We manipulate the imperfections of our body in order to attract a mate. Part of the environment that humans can change to have a better chance at experiencing sex is their own personal physical appearance. If bigger breasts and a fine-tuned torso and buttocks are what men want, then that is what women will strive for, thus ensuring their chances of satisfying the natural longing that occurs. Likewise, men may concentrate their efforts on their physical appearance by increasing the size and definition of their muscles or other parts of their body. It is no secret why imperfect people desire a quote-unquote sensual body. They want to satisfy the sexual longing they feel for each other. When they find a mate with whom they can satisfy this longing, they often stop worrying about their physical appearance, as long as their mate will accept their quote-unquote not so sensual physical appearance and still give them sex. 34. Imperfect bodies are not perfectly beautiful. Most of us in an imperfect world do not have a quote-unquote sensual appearance. This adds to the conflict and purpose of this world. If we all had a perfect physical mortal body, then our sexual longings would be less irritating to us because we would be in a better situation to have them satisfied by someone we would find quote-unquote sexually attractive. Our natural sex drive does not support monogamous relationships, one partner at a time. We use our free will to develop and support these monogamous relationships, however, because with this restriction, we are assured that we can satisfy our sexual desire. If we always have at least one partner around, we will most likely be successful at having sex. In addition, monogamy supports the emotional need of a human to be valued and appreciated as an individual above all others. As human societies progressed in the imperfect world, they incorporated the idea of marriage and commitment into the moral structure of society in order to protect a person's ability to have sex. Less attractive and weaker males benefit from such standards of morality because it limits the competition from other, more sexually attractive males. If rules and laws are in place to punish a married partner for having sex with another more sexually attractive partner, this would decrease the motivation for infidelity. In some societies today, the men mandate that their women cover their bodies from head to toe to eliminate other males lusting after them. They have established strict rules of chastity in their cultures with harsh consequences to dissuade sexual freedom. This enables the leaders and most of the men, who more often than not are not very sexually attractive, to enjoy the protection of their women and ensure themselves a continual sex partner. Ironically, these same societies also condone polygamy for the man, but vehemently restrict the woman's right to have more than one sexual partner. In this world, sexual longings are quote-unquote supposed to irritate us and take away from our happiness. Nevertheless, the sexual desire creates an unrealistic perception of beauty. Why unrealistic? Because in an imperfect world, it is almost impossible, as intended, for anyone to have naturally perfect features without the help of surgery, makeup, or specialized concentrations of energy by the will of the individual, such as doing 1,000 crunches a day to get the perfect abs. 35. The perfect body is not influenced by sexuality. In a perfect world, beauty is not based on sensuality. The sensory systems of a perfect body do not respond to any outside stimuli that is not introduced into the body by the motivation of free will. The perfect body was created to house our human essence. Therefore, it is in complete balance and harmony with our essence, and we have no need to seek to create the balance that is disrupted by the cravings we feel in an imperfect one. We eat, smell, taste, touch, and hear things because we allow our environment to provide these things, which causes our senses to react to them. Nothing in a perfect world causes our sensory receptors to react unwillingly, as does our imperfect body when we see a sexually attractive person. The perfect body is either without sex organs or, in the case of advanced human creators, the sex organs do not produce the hormonal stimulus that is responsible for our craving of sex that we refer to as lust. The only perception of beauty that exists in a perfect world comes from the power of the essence in comparing what we are seeing in the present with what was foundationalized within us in the past. The perfect body responds the same way to sexuality as a little child in our imperfect world responds. It doesn't. 36. We all recognize beauty in the same way. As has been touched upon previously, little children are drawn to beautiful people. A small child's sense of beauty does not come from any memory recorded in their new mortal experience. Their perception of beauty comes from the limited power of their essence that produces the memories of the physical appearance of advanced human beings associated with their foundationalization process. The subtle energy emissions of the essence are more readily available to little children who have not yet clouded the emissions with experiences recorded in their imperfect brain. Our creators were beautiful people. Their beauty came from their own perception of what beauty is to them, minus any sexual attraction. In other words, they do not need to have big breasts, finely shaped torsos, or any exuding muscles to appear as perfectly beautiful. Symmetry was the common basis for the beauty they perceived. 37. Perfect beauty is androgynous. Perfect beauty in the perfect body is androgynous, having both male and female characteristics. The perfect body, except for the bodies of those who continue to produce life, starts with a head that reflects the fine features of a woman combined with the subtle contour of the male's facial structure. Women in an imperfect body may need makeup to accentuate their beautiful features, whereas men have a natural construct to their face that doesn't require makeup. In an imperfect world, a woman can appear masculine without her makeup, and some men with finer features can appear feminine with makeup. The perfect body will never need makeup or anything else to accentuate its features. 38. Different skin colors add to the beauty of each individual. Our visual perception of skin color depends on the way the reflected light bounces off a person and enters our eyes. The perfect body is neither too dark nor too light, but is made to fit the physical attributes of the face. A person's skin tone is another personal choice made by the individual. Some advanced human beings are white, brown, tan, or whatever color fits their individual perception of beauty. Some people with certain features look better with lighter skin, while others with different features look better with darker skin. In our imperfect world, darker people want to be lighter with smaller features, and lighter people want to be darker with larger features because, regardless of the skin color, the symmetry and size of the features creates beauty. Many people think that a well-tanned body looks better than a white one. When our body becomes tan, its color base hides many of our imperfections, similar to how foundation hides the imperfections of a woman's face with the application of makeup. For some, many hours of basking in the sun to create the perfect tan adds to the individual's sense of beauty. 39. Desiring quote-unquote perfect beauty causes problems. Ironically, when humans bask in the sun, they currently wear sunglasses to protect their eyes from the sun and make it more enjoyable to be in its full power and glare. What humans fail to realize is that when they put on a pair of sunglasses, their body thinks that they are now in the shade. While in the shade, the body has no need to create the natural protective chemical reactions that it normally does to protect itself while in the sun. So while the sunbathers are enjoying the sun with their sunglasses on, their bodies are not producing anything to protect itself from the natural rays of the sun's energy. Their bodies actually think they are in the shade. This is just one of the many quote-unquote mistakes attributed to current human nature that no other animal on Earth has ever made. One would be hard-pressed to find another natural living organism wearing sunglasses and cooking its food over a hot barbecue. This leaves little wonder why only humans are affected with the many physical diseases that destroy their bodies and cause them premature and unnatural death. 40. Advanced mothers gave us our perception of beauty. Our mother foundationalized our perception of what is beautiful to us by creating us the way that she wanted. She is solely responsible for how we viewed ourselves in that world. She created our first primordial body based on her own perception of beauty, usually drawing on the body patterns from her own experience to create a unique body for each of us. Advanced mothers do not create male and female bodies. Their creations are the perfect reflection of what they know to be the perfect combination of both. Because our primordial bodies were neither male nor female, when we go through our experiences in this second stage of our development with only one of the two types of gender in each mortal life, we are never completely satisfied with our appearance. No matter what we do or how hard we try, we cannot recreate the perfection of beauty foundationalized in us by our mothers. As we've discussed, sexual attraction is the main basis of beauty in an imperfect world. Again, we have a subconscious desire to create experiences that match those stored in our essence. When it comes to those memories in our essence concerning the creation of human life, we have only one example of perfection recorded. New human beings were created by beautiful human female mothers. Therefore, our mother's physical beauty set the standard for us regarding any future sexual experience we would have in mortality. This is because we saw their sexual features and abilities while being foundationalized around them. However, we didn't have any sexual desire at that time. Therefore, we were not in the least bit attracted sexually to our mother or any of the other mothers or fathers or to our siblings. If we were allowed to associate with these women or men while in imperfect bodies with sexual desires, though, we would see them as the most sexually attractive women and men imaginable. 41. Our world has two general types of bodies. To give us the experience of the opposite of the perfectly featured and contoured body, our creators originally allowed two types of physical bodies on our imperfect world. The first was created to be darker, with larger, less refined features. The second, to be lighter with smaller, more refined features. The first was given the greater, quote-unquote, sensual physical appearance and attraction, while the second was given less sensuality, but more symmetry and a stronger likeness to the perfect human form. The first had bigger, firmer breasts, buttocks, muscles, and shoulders, fuller lips, and most other features to which an imperfect body is naturally attracted. Upon seeing these bodies in their natural state as a whole, we might not consider them to be an example of the perfect human presentation of beauty, but their overall shape would resonate with our sexual desires. The second had smaller bodies and features, which was a form that would make us feel more comfortable and exude what all humans relate to as natural beauty. Combined, these two body types would create very attractive human beings. 42. Beauty is created by the mixture of body types. When these two types of bodies began to intermix upon this earth, they created the myriads of human shapes and presentations of beauty that we now find in our imperfect world. Without question or prejudice, the people who are recognized as the most beautiful and sexually attractive people in the world are those who are a combination of their lighter and darker ancestors. Here's how this took place in the beginning of the human race on our earth. 43. Originally, the two imperfect body types were separated. As explained previously, this world was prepared through natural causes and effects that, although initiated and overseen by advanced human beings, were allowed to exist and act and be acted upon with very limited advanced human interaction. In the beginning, all of the land masses of the earth were one large landmass. This was necessary because plants prosper and grow best when they are in one group. However, over time, over millions of years, which doesn't matter to advanced humans, for time only matters to those who die, the land drifted apart, creating what we now recognize as hemispheres and continents. When human beings were first allowed to exist upon the earth, the land had already separated into continents and islands. In the warm environs of Africa in the eastern hemisphere, the first type of body, the darker-skinned, less refined featured, more sensual body, was allowed to develop in mortality. In this part of the earth, the forces of nature had created an environment of balance with an established quote-unquote food chain of nature over which mortal humans had very limited control. In other words, the success of any animal in this part of the world was due to its position on the food chain ladder. Human beings were certainly not on the top rung, therefore they were susceptible to predators just as any other animal. The stress of being a human being was great, and a stronger body construct was necessary to survive in that environment. In addition, a strong sexual attraction was vital to ensure that mating and producing offspring would create and maintain a foothold for humankind to survive in that natural but hostile environment. 44. Advanced humans oversaw the creation of the Homo sapiens race upon this earth. It was in this eastern part of the world that certain animals were allowed to breed with other species of animals until a body developed that could be inhabited by a human essence. We have already discussed how current genetic and biological engineering coupled with hybrid breeding techniques allow the creation of a particular type of animal that does what its creators want it to do. Therefore, it shouldn't be too hard for us to accept the fact that advanced human quote-unquote hybrid breeders had their hand in forming a human body out of the animals already upon the earth that they had also created and placed here. They did this through patient and subtle manipulation, without changing environments or any particular species of animals' natural propensities. In time, a body had been created that was able to accommodate the human essence and live in the environment in which it was placed. This body can best be described as the earliest known Homo sapiens species. The theory of evolution has already been explained and discounted. The evolution of the kind of physical body that could house a human essence was orchestrated and controlled in the environs of an imperfect natural world. The intent of our creators in producing a humanoid body in this manner was necessary to help us understand the need for human intervention in all aspects of nature, including how animals are formed for a specific purpose. In addition, they oversaw the creation of a body that was counterproductive to, the opposite of, the perfect human body and how it functions in its perfection. 45. Carnivores and herbivores were separated from each other over time. The environs of the earth changed as natural land separation took place over time, and as the land masses acquired a different geographical location than where they originally developed. Initially, most animal species were created in mild climates where the temperatures remained stable and consistent throughout the year, where a landmass might have originated as lush tropical gardens of consistent mild weather. Once the land drifted to another part of the earth, it became subjected to weather conditions that were not suitable to maintain its original environment. This contributed to the extinction of many prehistoric species of plants and animals, but not all. Along with the change in climate, a general migration of animals occurred, subtly directed by the advanced human beings who oversaw the creation and formation of the earth. These environmental changes eventually separated the main body of predators, carnivores, from the more docile herds of plant eaters, herbivores. A southern migration was natural because of the cold winter days of the northern areas of the land masses. The carnivores, flesh-eating predators, couldn't find much food in the winter, and their systems were not conducive to cold weather, so they went south. This is why in our current world, those main bodies of carnivores maintaining the higher rungs of the food chain ladder, such as tigers, lions, etc., are usually found in the southern tropical climates, while the more docile creatures, such as the former larger herds of bison, buffalo, deer, elk, etc., are generally found in the more temperate climates. 46. North America is where the light race of the human species originated. In the Western Hemisphere, in the area currently known as North America, our creators found a place to introduce the second type of body upon the earth. These more refined, lighter-skinned, less sensual-bodied people would never have survived in the imperfect environs and natural effects of the world without our creators' intervention. It was here where the advanced mothers came and created bodies from the elements of the imperfect world that could house the essences of the children they had foundationalized on their planet. These essences were now ready to embark on their second stage of development, the experience of mortality in an imperfect world. These bodies, just as the bodies of the darker-skinned human beings who developed upon the African continent, were created with gender and the ability to perpetuate the human species. It is important to understand that, quote-unquote, these essences brought from an advanced human world were also placed in the bodies of darker-skinned Homo sapiens of the Eastern Hemisphere. There was and is no difference in value and importance between the essences that were placed in the different parts of the world. There was a need for both kinds in order to begin our human experience on this earth. The biggest difference between them, though, was that one group was allowed to develop on its own without any initial intervention by our advanced mothers, while the others were taught how to act appropriately as human beings in an imperfect world. We needed the actual experience to see what would happen in each case. Because every human being assigned to this solar system and Earth has lived many lives during mortality, most of us have experienced an existence as both a Homo sapiens of a darker toned skin and as a lighter skinned human form. There is certainly no reason for any of us to assume that our present race or skin color is any better than or unequal to any other. We all have equal essences. 47. Advanced mothers created mortal bodies. Every advanced mother who had created new human beings in the primordial world and led them through their foundationalization process left their home planet and came to this earth. Each produced only one child in the less hostile Western Hemisphere, together producing an exact number of females and males. They reared them in this imperfect world, much the same way that a mother rears her children in modern times, by restricting their free agency, unlike in the primordial world, in an effort to teach them how to survive in an imperfect environment. They taught their children how to live with nature. They taught them when and how to migrate to habitable areas when the weather changed. They taught them to be gatherers and live off of what was produced naturally. For these children were not taught to eat meat in the beginning. Once the human essences were placed in the mortal bodies the advanced mothers created, their new bodies and brains could not access the memories stored therein. The only experience that the now imperfectly embodied humans could remember was that they were learning lots of new things in their new environment. This new environment included dangers that could affect the safety of the innocent children and harm their physical body, as well as take away their experience of happiness. 48. One of our first experiences of separation anxiety was saying goodbye to our mothers. Advanced mothers reared their mortal children on this earth to adulthood, wherein the children could now take care of themselves, having had the experience for many years in their new environment. Once this was accomplished, the advanced mothers went back to their own planet. The farewell experience was not one of tears or unhappiness for their mothers, but it was certainly the first experience of unhappiness felt by their now mortal children. A great anxiety of separation was felt, and the first instincts of the unknown, fear, were experienced at that time. In parallel, the darker-skinned Homo sapiens, created in the other hemisphere, were also experiencing great amounts of unhappiness, attempting to survive in the natural, imperfect world, particularly after one of their close acquaintances was taken through death. The advanced mothers knew that what was going to happen to their children was for their own good and development. The mortals could now only trust in what they were taught, not knowing for sure what was about to happen once their mothers were gone. 49. Our essences were transported to our new world. The introduction of this second type of mortal body in the Western Hemisphere coincided with the advent of a human-compatible body being ready in the Eastern Hemisphere. All of our human essences that were foundationalized in our Creator's galaxy and solar system were brought to this new world and placed in either dark or light bodies during this first period of mortality, except for one. The one who was foundationalized as the overseer of this solar system stayed behind and did what he was created and taught to do, observe, and oversee everything that happened in our solar system. To do so, he needed to have the advanced technology available to him, as well as the ability to continue to be tutored properly. This continued mentoring and tutelage was overseen by his father, our father, and also by the overseer who was assigned to the solar system where our father was created. Although the chosen overseer for our solar system was prepared before the foundation of our world, we were still not 100% convinced that he would always do the right thing on our behalf. The only way we would ever be convinced that he could be trusted to do for us what we couldn't do for ourselves was if he also became mortal and went through the experience of an imperfect world like we had to. 50. Our first experience with death was our primordial separation from our creators. In a sense, before we left our perfect primordial world, all of us were put to death, or better, our essences were taken out of the perfect bodies in which we were foundationalized, so that they could be transported to our new world. It could be said that we experienced our first death when we were separated from our creators, the perfect world where they live, and from the perfect body that our mother created for us. Our creators literally took apart the elements of our primordial perfect bodies and allowed the subatomic particles that they were made of to go back to their original state, to again be used by our mothers in the formation of the bodies for the next new batch of children. 51. We struggle to find out who we are. Once we were brought to our new world and introduced into our imperfect mortal bodies, we were in what could be considered a quote-unquote fallen state from the one that we were used to. And ever since we first realized that we could think and reason, we have been constantly struggling to figure out the sense of our mortal life, having a never-ending longing for something that we cannot figure out. We are constantly trying to figure out who we are and why we exist. 52. Some new mortals lived in innocence with a semblance of perfection. After the mothers left the light-skinned humans, they, the children, lived very healthy lives as they began to take from the environment what naturally tasted good to them. They were herbivores, but found little joy in the taste of the grasses and other plants that the animals around them were eating. They were basically fruitarians, who ate only those foods that produced seeds within themselves and needed another animal, humans, to eat them and spread their seeds so that they could promulgate their own plant species. The mortals who developed in the Western Hemisphere did not cook or process food in any form. The mothers did not teach their children how to cook or how to kill other animals to sustain their lives. In the beginning, they took their place in the food chain and only ate those things that needed to be eaten for our cells to continue to reproduce themselves. With symbiotic reverence, they lived in balance with the natural world that surrounded them. 53. People in the Western Hemisphere were not sexually attracted to each other in the beginning. While in these first mortal bodies, we associated with each other the way that brothers and sisters associate with each other on this earth. Although we had the ability to have sex, we were not sexually attracted in the least to our quote-unquote brother or our quote-unquote sister. We lived for many years having about as much desire to mate and have children as we do with our own mortal siblings, with whom we have been reared with since birth. We observed other animals mating and producing offspring, and we were taught by our mothers that this is the way that humans also procreate. But with our brother and sister, forget it. We were not naturally attracted to them at that time. 54. Our essence waits in the atmosphere until a body is ready upon birth. The atmosphere of our world sustains the positive and negative forces that produce what we call gravity and magnetism. Our essence cannot escape the confines of the Earth's atmosphere, as its positive energy is continually attracted to the negative energy created by the Earth. The terms positive and negative attraction are used hypothetically to illustrate opposing forces. As mentioned above, at the same time period that our human essences were brought from our perfect world and placed on this world, the other type of bodies, Homo sapiens, were ready to attract the energy levels of our essences. This process was explained previously. At that time, all of the human essences brought to this world were either in a mortal body or hovering in our atmosphere waiting for the next human body to be created. These bodies cannot be produced except by the free will and choice of human mortals. Therefore, the mortals with the first type of body, Homo sapiens, living in the eastern hemisphere, those more sexually attractive and conducive to reproduction, began to have sex with each other and to produce bodies for the essences waiting in the atmosphere to inhabit them. 55. The more sensual people influenced sexual behavior for all early humans. In a short time, the darker race of mortals found a means of travel across the ocean, and some of them eventually ended up encountering the lighter race in the Western Hemisphere. The lighter-skinned humans were in jeopardy of their own extinction because they still had not found it within themselves to have sex with a brother or a sister. Our advanced mothers did not create all the people at once. There was a wide variety of age groups because our mothers knew it would take us a while to learn that there was no other way to propagate our species than through sex. As it is in most cases of emotional motivation regarding the perpetuation of life, the females figured this out before the males. As old age set in, some of these lighter-skinned people began to die off without being replaced by new creations of mortals. Nevertheless, once the more sexually advanced darker races of humans found them, this began to change. 56. Protectionism led to social deterioration. Once in contact with each other, the lighter-skinned people were now sexually aroused toward the darker species. This led to indiscriminate sexual behavior, which began to separate brother and sister and once again caused fear. Soon, stress and discontent arose among a people who had never known such feelings. To protect their new human emotions and maintain their sense of individuality from their darker-skinned neighbors, some of the lighter-skinned people did not mingle with them. Instead, they migrated with, quote-unquote, their own kind, and began to see the benefit of becoming sexually active with each other so that they could perpetuate and protect what they saw at the time as, quote-unquote, their own kind of human being. The smaller, weaker, and less passionate, lighter-skinned people were threatened by the physical strength of the darker-skinned humans, and the fear and threat resulted in the first human murders upon our earth. 57. We experience each different race while in mortality. Because the purpose of our existence upon this earth is to experience all things, there was no definitive selection of which essences would inhabit which bodies at first. In the beginning of our mortality, our essences entered the bodies randomly, according to the location of our essence in the atmosphere at the time a newborn body came out of a mortal mother. Nevertheless, each of us was eventually given ample opportunity to experience a life in the different types of bodies made available through our imperfect world. In the beginning, some of us were the darker-skinned humans living in the eastern hemisphere, and others were the lighter-skinned humans living in the western hemisphere. But from the beginning and throughout the rest of our existence, we would remain equal human essences, each having chosen for ourselves what humanity type was best for us. Our choice of life experience in mortality would be influenced by what we desired before we came to this earth. As explained previously, there are advanced human beings who act as our quote-unquote guidance counselors. These beings have the power to ensure that each of us has the life experiences that will best help us learn what we wanted to accomplish during this time of mortal probation. 58. Different human races were formed: black, white, and tan. In time, the mixture of the light and dark DNA patterns produced varying tones of skin and human features. This is how the modern races of human beings came to be and became logistically and geographically located throughout our current world. 59. The different races relocated themselves. The darker-skinned people, we will refer to them as the quote-unquote black race, migrated from the eastern hemisphere to the western hemisphere, where they interbred with the light-skinned people we will refer to as the quote-unquote white race. This created varying features and skin colors, which we will refer to as the quote-unquote tan race. The white race felt threatened and left the western hemisphere to the tan race, migrating across the ocean to the eastern hemisphere, where they found the fertile grounds of the rivers and tributaries that flowed into the ocean. Having the knowledge of how to survive in the more harsh environs of a winter, the white race spread northward from the equator in the eastern hemisphere. The black race remained south of the equator in what is commonly referred to as Africa. Some of the black race also had migrated to the continent of Australia instead of staying in the western hemisphere. By about 5000 BCE, the tan race occupied the majority of the northern part of the western hemisphere. The black race occupied the southern parts of the eastern hemisphere, and the white race occupied the northern parts of the eastern hemisphere. 60. The tan people became the Mongolic races of Eastern Asia. As human nature took its course on our emotions and our instinctive desire to maintain our independence and individuality, human wars and contentions began. The tan race was at continual war with itself in the northern parts of the western hemisphere. No one had yet discovered the southern parts. To avoid these wars, some found their way further north, where they discovered the Bering Strait that allowed them to rather easily traverse the narrow span of water to the eastern hemisphere. Following the course of the fertile lands that bordered the Pacific Ocean, these tan races eventually colonized the eastern shoreline of the eastern hemisphere. They also ventured out into the ocean and colonized the islands of the sea. This is where the modern Mongolic races came from. 61. The whites inhabited northern Europe, and the blacks dwelt in the south. With the advent of swords, spears, bows and arrows, armor, and other accoutrements of warfare, the white race developed better ways to protect itself from the much stronger black race, eventually isolating the black race to the confines of the very southernmost regions of the eastern hemisphere. The white race overran the northern parts of the eastern hemisphere, but rarely found it necessary to involve themselves with the Mongolic races of the east, as these people generally kept to themselves and their own cultures. 62. The Western Hemisphere was soon forgotten. Over time, the white race had all but forgotten everything about a Western Hemisphere. However, small groups did return to the Western Hemisphere, where they stayed for a time, but because of their own internal wars and dissensions, that at this time had become an integral part of human nature, they decimated themselves to extinction. Many years later, however, the white race would once again discover and overrun the Western Hemisphere, destroying the tan races and positioning themselves as the supreme rulers of the world. This racial ignorance and arrogance would create the prejudice and social deterioration that is the basis of our imperfect world today. Summary. The races of humans that cover the earth today are descendants of one of the three races we have described: black, white, and tan. Yet there cannot be found upon the earth any human being who does not have a mixture of the DNA patterns of all of these races. There are some who have maintained a more pure form of the tan race, or of the black or white races, but the bodies of all human beings are a mixture of each of the human races on this earth. There is no quote-unquote pure blood. The blood of the African was just as quote-unquote pure, or better, quote-unquote impure, as the blood of the imperfect bodies created for the lighter-skinned people. Because of the unevenness of the mixture, the majority of us are not good representations of ultimate human beauty and perfection. Most people are not that good looking, although almost all of us, with a normal, imperfect body, are intensely sensual creatures. The proper mixture in the beginning of a lighter-skinned, more beautiful mortal, combined with a darker-skinned, more sensual one, brought equality to us all, thus eliminating any excuse of racism. We are all just as much black as we are white. We are all Homo sapiens, with wise intent and for the purpose of allowing us to see what it would be like to have the ability to experience human sexuality. The races that constitute the imperfect human body were planned by our creators, and because of the imperfection of our bodies and the constant quote-unquote longing of our sexual urges, we have used our imperfect bodies and our free will to create a world completely opposite in almost every regard to the perfect world where we once lived. Consistent with what we have experienced in this imperfect world is the following wise rationale and logical conclusion we will arrive at. To transform our world back into a perfect one and further conform our senses and emotions to the foundationalized, perfect balance that brings us our individual happiness, we must eliminate, in most cases, the very aspect of our mortal nature that causes all the problems: sexuality. The perfect human body has always existed in some part of the universe. It is the ultimate biological form of matter that can work with the power of the essence to give a human being the best life experience possible. We started out our existence as a human being in these perfected bodies, but to learn to appreciate them, we needed something to compare them to. Our creators organized our current world with the purpose of allowing us to store the comparative experience of a perfect world in our essences. These experiences will be available to us forever. Because a perfect body can recall each experience with the same sensation and magnitude as when the event was first recorded, we will always have a constant remembrance of what it was like to have an imperfect body in an imperfect world. And with this vivid recollection, we will be forever grateful and appreciative of the perfect human body